What happens when a late-night host finally asks the questions everyone else is too scared to say out loud? What you're about to see isn't comedy anymore. It's chaos. This was the night The Tonight Show stopped being entertainment and became a battlefield. Tonight, we're breaking down every moment that led to one of the most explosive clashes ever broadcast on The Tonight Show. By the time The Tonight Show started, the air in Studio 6B felt electric. Fallon's monologue went off without a hitch, jokes about celebrity weddings, a quick jab at Congress, and a few self-deprecating lines to warm up the crowd. Behind the curtain, Trump waited with his usual confidence, straightening his red tie and chatting with his aide. "They'll love me," he said with that familiar smirk. "They always do." When Fallon finally said the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Donald Trump," the room exploded. Half the audience stood and cheered, while the other half groaned and booed. The mix of noise was unlike anything The Tonight Show had heard before. Fallon forced a grin as Trump strode out, waving like a man who owned the stage. As he sat down across from Fallon, there was a moment of pure silence. Fallon laughed awkwardly, glancing at the crowd, but Trump didn't. He leaned back, arms resting on the chair, his eyes locked on the host. "Donald, welcome back to The Tonight Show," Fallon said, his voice smooth but tight. "It's great to have you here." "Always a pleasure, Jimmy," Trump replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "I heard your ratings have been great lately. Probably because I'm here tonight, right?" The crowd laughed nervously. Fallon forced a chuckle. He tried to move on, to keep things casual, but even his own laugh felt hollow. The first few minutes looked like any other Tonight Show interview. Fallon leaned forward with that familiar grin, the one that had made him a late-night favorite for years. He opened with light jokes about Trump's schedule, about how he probably spent more time on airplanes than in offices. Trump laughed, the kind of laugh that wasn't really laughter, more of a statement. "I'm in control here." Fallon kept his smile, but something about it felt off. "So, Donald," Fallon said, trying to sound casual, "the last time you were here, our ratings went through the roof. I'm guessing tonight will be the same?" Trump adjusted his tie, leaned back, and said proudly, "Jimmy, the ratings are always fantastic when I'm around. People tune in because they want to hear the truth, not the fake news nonsense they get everywhere else." The crowd reacted with a mix of cheers and groans. Fallon chuckled, but inside, he could feel his stomach tightening. "Well, I'm glad we can give America a little fun tonight," he said, trying to keep the tone light. Trump smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who just took the first punch and was already planning his counter. For a moment, Fallon thought maybe they'd survive the segment. The audience relaxed a little, laughing at a few of Trump's self-deprecating jokes. But then Fallon glanced down at his cue cards, the ones with the safe questions on top and the real ones buried underneath. He hesitated, fingers tapping the desk. The producer offstage shook his head slightly, mouthing, "Don't do it." Fallon looked back at Trump, who was waiting, perfectly still, as if daring him to ask. "So," Fallon began carefully, "you've been talking a lot about the economy lately, saying it was the strongest in history during your time in office. Some economists, though, say that growth actually started before your presidency." The room went silent. Trump's face didn't move for a second. Then he turned his head slowly, his expression hardening. "Some economists?" he repeated, his voice low and sharp. "Jimmy, are you talking about the fake economists? The same people who said the stock market would crash if I got elected? The ones who were wrong every single time?" He leaned forward now, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on Fallon. "Hey, I'm just saying there are different opinions," Fallon replied with a forced grin. "We like hearing all sides." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. The illusion of comfort was gone. Trump wasn't smiling anymore. He was locked in, ready to fight. Fallon's cue card suddenly felt heavy in his hands. The laughter that used to come so easily now sounded distant, almost inappropriate. The silence after that last exchange was heavier than it should have been. Fallon glanced at his producer, who gave him a faint nod, a silent cue to keep going. It was the kind of moment every talk show host dreads, the point where the interview stops being entertainment and starts turning into something else. Fallon shuffled his cards again, his smile tight. "All right," he said, trying to sound casual. "Let's talk numbers for a second. You've said your administration had the strongest economy, but what about the deficit? Some reports say it actually went up under your leadership." The words had barely left his mouth when Trump snapped his head toward him. "The deficit?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Jimmy, are you seriously lecturing me about the deficit?" The word lecturing hit the air like a slap. The audience went quiet. Fallon blinked, caught off guard. Trump leaned closer, his voice low but cutting. "Do you even know what the deficit was when I left office compared to what it is now? Do you have any idea what you're talking about, or are you just reading whatever they put on those little cards of yours?" Fallon tried to laugh it off. "Hey, I'm just asking, like a journalist," he said with a grin, hoping to diffuse the tension. But Trump wasn't buying it. "Jimmy," he said, smirking, "you're a comedian, not Walter Cronkite. You tell jokes, play games with celebrities, and dance around your studio. That's fine. People love that. But don't sit there pretending to be a real reporter." The crowd shifted in their seats, a nervous ripple spreading through the studio. Fallon's grin faltered for the first time that night. He looked down at his desk, pretending to check his notes, but really just trying to steady himself. Trump wasn't done. He leaned forward again, elbows on his knees, voice calm now but dripping with control. "You see, Jimmy, the problem is, people like you think they can ask tough questions and look brave doing it. But you don't understand the first thing about what you're talking about. You've never built anything. You've never run a business. You've never made a decision that actually mattered." Fallon felt the words land hard. For a moment, he didn't know whether to answer or let them pass. His hands tightened on the edge of his desk. Trump was no longer the guest. He had taken over. Fallon, usually the one in control, suddenly looked smaller, retreating behind his desk like a man realizing the stage he built might no longer belong to him. Fallon could feel sweat gathering at the back of his neck as he tried to steer things back to normal. But Trump wasn't letting go. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Fallon, and said flatly, "You know what this is, Jimmy? This isn't comedy. It's a setup, a hit job." The audience murmured, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Fallon blinked, thrown by the directness. "A hit job? Come on, Donald, I'm just asking questions." But Trump cut him off. "No, you're not. You're reading from a script someone handed you. You invited me here to make yourself look tough. Congratulations, you got your little ambush moment off stage," the producer was whispering urgently into Fallon's earpiece. "Cut to commercial. Now." Fallon could see the frantic hand signals coming from the wings, but he ignored them. His jaw tightened. This was his show. If he cut now, Trump would own the moment. He straightened in his seat. "Nobody's ambushing anyone," Fallon said, his voice lower but firm. "I treat every guest the same." Trump raised his eyebrows, unimpressed. "Really? You treat every guest the same? You ask pop stars about deficits too?" Fallon tried to laugh, but the sound came out flat. "You're overreacting." Trump's voice sharpened. "No, I'm responding." Big difference. Fallon forced a smirk, the kind that used to disarm anyone across from him. "Donald, this isn't a press conference. It's a late-night show. People want to hear from you, but they also want honesty." Trump let out a quick, humorless laugh. "Honesty? Jimmy, your audience doesn't want honesty. They want a train wreck. They want to see you take me down and fail. And right now, you're giving them exactly what they came for." Fallon's face changed, just slightly, but enough for the cameras to catch it. The grin faltered. The eyes hardened. For the first time, he looked angry. The audience felt it too. The once friendly crowd was no longer united. One half clapped and cheered, the other half booed loudly. Someone shouted, "Let him talk!" Another voice shot back, "Kick him out!" The noise spread like fire. People were on their feet now, yelling, filming on their phones. The studio had turned into a shouting match between two realities, one cheering for Fallon, the other for Trump. Camera operators scrambled to keep up, their lenses swinging wildly as the scene unraveled. Fallon tried to speak over the chaos, but his mic was drowned out by the crowd. Trump, however, stayed calm, almost enjoying it. He looked around the studio, that faint smirk still on his face, and said into the microphone, "You see, Jimmy? This is your America right now. Confused, divided, angry, and you helped make it that way." The words hit harder than any punch. Fallon stared at him, speechless. Fallon tried to steady his voice. "You're not answering the question, Donald," he said, leaning forward, hands gripping the edge of his desk. "You keep deflecting, but people want real answers." Trump gave a short, sharp laugh. "Deflecting? You think your jokes can handle reality, Jimmy? You're out of your depth." The audience fell into stunned silence. Fallon fired back, his tone rising. "I'm asking what every viewer at home wants to know." Trump didn't blink. "You don't speak for them. You speak for whoever's writing those cue cards in your hand." Each sentence hit like a body shot. There were no laughs anymore, no smiles, just the dull hum of tension building past the point of comfort. Fallon tried to regain control, but his words stumbled. I write my own questions," he said. Trump leaned in, voice dropping low. "Then you should write better ones." Gasps erupted from the audience. Fallon's cheeks flushed. "You know what, Donald? Maybe if you actually answered something instead of turning everything into a circus, we could have a real conversation." Trump straightened his tie. "This is a real conversation. You just can't handle being outmatched." Fallon stood up, pointing his finger. "I'm not outmatched. I'm doing my job." Trump's voice boomed back. "Then do it without hiding behind the laugh track." From the back of the studio, movement caught the corner of Fallon's eye. Two security guards were quietly positioning themselves near the stage, ready in case things got worse. The audience noticed. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into a flurry of phone screens raised high. On the wide shot, viewers at home could see it, uniformed security now visible at the edge of the frame. Within seconds, Twitter lit up. #Fallon versus Trump climbed the trending list. Millions of people across the country started recording, sharing, arguing in real time. Fallon looked out at the crowd, half furious, half thrilled, and realized there was no going back. Whatever happened next, this moment would follow both men for the rest of their careers. The noise inside Studio 6B was deafening now, half outrage, half adrenaline. Fallon tried to pull things back, his voice shaking slightly. "Let's just take a breath, okay?" But Trump wasn't letting up. He leaned across the desk, his tone suddenly quieter but sharper. "You know, Jimmy, I actually thought we were friends." The words caught Fallon off guard. For a split second, he softened. "Friends don't insult me on my own show," he said, his voice low, almost disappointed. That word, friends, hung in the air heavier than any insult. Even the audience seemed to feel it. For all the chaos, that one word made everything sting a little more. The silence didn't last. From somewhere in the balcony, a man yelled, "Ask about January 6th!" The crowd gasped. Fallon froze. Trump's head snapped upward, his glare slicing through the lights. "That's what this is about, isn't it?" he growled. Fallon's face went pale, but he didn't answer. Someone else shouted from the crowd, "Let him talk!" Another voice snapped back, "Throw him out!" The balcony erupted, people standing, arguing, waving their arms. Studio security scrambled to contain it, but the crowd was beyond control now. It wasn't a studio anymore. It was a mob. Phones were up, recording every second. Trump straightened his jacket, his tone suddenly cold and deliberate. "You've turned comedy into propaganda," he said. The audience gasped again. Fallon stood up from his chair, no longer smiling. "And you've turned politics into a circus," he shot back. The words landed like a punch. The tension finally exploded. Both men were on their feet now, voices rising over the restless audience. Off camera, Fallon's producer was practically begging, "Jimmy, end it. Please." But Fallon didn't move. "You invited me here to humiliate me," Trump said, jabbing a finger toward him. Fallon fired back, "I invited you here to tell the truth." Trump's voice boomed, "You don't want truth, Jimmy. You want headlines." Fallon's hands were shaking, but his voice didn't waver. "Maybe headlines are what it takes for people to finally see who you really are." The cameras zoomed in tight. Trump towered over Fallon, the stage lights glinting off his cufflinks. Fallon gripped his cue cards like a shield, his breathing uneven. For a long moment, neither spoke. You could see the sweat on Fallon's forehead, the fury in Trump's eyes. The audience was dead silent, sensing the danger in the air. Nobody knew what would happen next, whether words would turn into something worse. Then Fallon broke it. His voice came out quieter than anyone expected. "Donald, I think it's time for you to leave." The sentence hung in the air, heavy, final. Trump didn't move. He just stared at him, almost amused. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10. You could hear the cameras whirring. Then, slowly, Trump smiled. "You'll regret this for the rest of your career," he said, his tone calm, almost friendly. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Trump didn't storm off. He didn't shout or argue. Instead, he turned to face the audience with a slow, deliberate smile, his microphone still live. "You just saw what fear looks like," he said calmly, gesturing toward Fallon. "Fear of truth." The words hit like a grenade. The studio erupted. Cheers, boos, whistles, shouts. Some stood to applaud him, others yelled for security to get him out. The split in the crowd was pure chaos. Trump didn't flinch. He straightened his jacket, waved to the cameras, and began his walk toward the backstage exit. Security moved in, but he didn't need them. He walked slowly, soaking it all in, the noise, the lights, the eyes glued to him. It wasn't an exit. It was a victory lap. Behind him, Fallon stood motionless at his desk, his cue cards scattered across the floor. He looked less like a host and more like someone who had just watched his own show catch fire. The set lights glared down on him as if they were part of the interrogation. Crew members rushed the stage, but nobody seemed to know what to do. In the control room, the feed director was shouting, "Cut! Cut to black!" But it was too late. The clip was already live on social media, millions of people recording, reposting, commenting in real time. Fallon's show wasn't just off the rails, it was trending. By the next morning, the clip had become unavoidable. Every news show replayed it on a split screen. Fallon's stunned face on one side, Trump's calm defiance on the other. Commentators dissected every second like it was a political debate, not a talk show gone wrong. One network called Trump's exit a masterclass in control. Another called it the collapse of modern civility. Across the country, people argued in diners, offices, and online threads. Half said Trump had exposed the media. The other half said Fallon had shown what happens when you finally push back. It wasn't just a fight on television anymore. It was another front in America's cultural war. That night, after everyone had gone home, Fallon sat alone in the empty studio. The audience seats were dark, the smell of stage lights still hanging in the air. The cue cards were still on his desk, untouched. His producer walked in quietly, unsure whether to speak. Fallon didn't look up. "Did we just make history?" he asked softly. "Or a mistake?" The producer didn't answer. There was no answer. Fallon just sat there, staring at the spot where Trump had stood, the argument replaying in his mind. Every word, every pause, every look. It felt less like a show and more like a warning, a reminder that one wrong question can change everything. As the camera lights dimmed for the final time that night, a quiet narration played over the silence. In an age where laughter was meant to unite, two men turned it into a battlefield, and America couldn't look away. If you thought late-night TV couldn't get any more unpredictable, think again, because this was just the beginning. Moments like this remind us that behind every smile and every laugh, there's a breaking point. So, what do you think really pushed it over the edge? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned, because the next clash might be even bigger than this one.